The oven cracked like thunder, and I knew something was wrong before I even opened my eyes. Smoke curled under the bakery door. Somewhere behind me, Mara was shouting for water, and my claws slipped on the flour-dusted floor as I scrambled toward the heat instead of away from it. I was not supposed to run toward fire. Every instinct my kind was born with should have told me to flee. But I had never learned to listen to instinct. I had learned to listen to timers and recipes and the sound of dough rising in the quiet hours before dawn. That night, everything I was would finally be tested. But to understand why a dragon ran toward danger with nothing but bread on his mind, you have to go back to the beginning, back to the day I hatched into a world that was never meant for me. I was not born in fire. I was born in flour. My egg came from a transport ship that fell out of the sky near the edge of New Harrow, a small farming colony, built by humans on a cold, quiet world. The adults who should have raised me did not survive the crash. There were other eggs too, but mine was the only one that still had warmth inside it when the rescue teams arrived. The colonists could have let it die with the rest. Instead, a woman named Mara wrapped it in a blanket and carried it into her bakery, because the ovens there stayed warm all through the night. I do not remember the crash. I remember warmth and the smell of yeast and a voice that hummed old songs while kneading dough. That voice became the first sound I ever loved. By the time I cracked out of my shell, I was already listening to the rhythm of that kitchen. Rise, punch, rest, bake. It became the heartbeat I grew up inside of, long before I understood what I was supposed to be. Dragon hatchlings, I would later learn, are supposed to imprint on fire. They are supposed to claw at embers, breathe smoke before they can walk, and howl at the scent of blood. I did none of that. My first instinct was to reach for warm bread cooling on a rack, and my first sound was not a growl, but something closer to a purr when Mara scratched under my chin the way she scratched her old dog. The other colonists were unsure of me at first. Some worried that a dragon raised without other dragons would grow wild and dangerous once its true nature woke up. Others simply found me strange, a scaled creature the size of a large cat, following a baker around a kitchen instead of hunting in the frozen fields outside. But Mara never treated me like a problem waiting to happen. She taught me to read a timer before I could speak in full sentences. She taught me to measure flour by feel, to know when dough was ready by the way it stretched instead of tore. I learned patience from bread long before I understood what patience meant. By the time I was old enough to walk the length of the colony on my own, I had never breathed a single spark, not even a flicker of smoke. The other children of New Harrow used to ask me to blow fire like the stories described, and every time, nothing happened. I would just tilt my head and offer them a warm roll instead, which usually made them forget the question entirely. Word of a fireless dragon spread further than I expected. It reached the ears of my own kind. An elder of my species arrived on a supply ship not long after, sent to check on the last surviving egg from the crash. His name was Threx, and he was taller than any human I had seen, with scales the color of burnt iron, and eyes that studied me like I was a puzzle with a piece missing. He watched me for 3 days. He watched me knead dough, deliver bread to the elderly widow who lived near the grain silo, and sit quietly while children read to me in the evenings. On the 4th day, he finally spoke, and his voice was heavy with disappointment. He told me that a dragon without fire was not truly a dragon at all, only a shadow wearing scales. He said I had been raised soft by creatures who did not understand what my kind was meant to become. He said this world had broken something in me that could not be fixed. I did not have an answer for him. I only had bread, still warm from the oven, which I offered without thinking. He did not take it. That conversation stayed with me longer than I wanted it to. That night I sat outside the bakery, under a sky full of unfamiliar stars, wondering if he was right, wondering if I was failing to become whatever I was supposed to be. Mara found me there. She did not tell me to ignore him. She simply asked what I thought fire was actually for. I did not have an answer for that either. Not then. The frost came 2 weeks later, earlier and colder than anyone expected. It rolled down from the northern hills overnight and settled over New Harrow like a blanket made of ice. By morning, the grain silos were groaning under the weight of frozen condensation, and the harvest that the entire colony depended on was in danger of ruin before it could even be stored properly. Threx watched from the edge of the settlement with his arms crossed, waiting, I think, to see whether the humans would fail without dragonfire to warm their stores. Perhaps he expected this disaster to prove his point. Perhaps he expected me to finally do something instinctive and draconic to save the day. I did not breathe fire. I still could not. But I knew heat. I had spent every day of my life inside a kitchen that ran on it. I ran to Mara first, and together we pulled every heated stone from beneath the ovens, the ones used to keep dough-proofing warm through cold nights. I organized the younger colonists into relay lines, the same way Mara organized her kitchen during the busiest mornings, each person passing a warm stone to the next, until they reached the silos. We packed them along the walls, layer after layer, borrowing warmth from bread ovens to save a harvest. It was not glamorous, it was not powerful, it was hours of tired arms and cold hands, and someone always running back for more heated stones, more coffee, more bread, to keep everyone's strength up through the night. I kept the workers fed the entire time, passing warm loaves down the same lines we used for stones, because I understood something Threx never gave me credit for. Fire is not only about burning, sometimes it is about keeping something alive. By morning, the frost had broken, and the grain was saved. Nobody in New Harrow had used a single flame taller than a cooking fire, and yet the colony stood, fed and warm, because of patience, cooperation, and the kind of care I had learned from a woman who baked bread for a living. Threx said nothing that day. I caught him watching the relay lines from a distance, his expression unreadable, but he did not leave. The real fire came 3 nights later, and it came from a place I never expected. One of the bakery ovens overheated in the middle of the night, an old valve finally giving out after years of use. I woke to the smell of smoke and the sound of Mara shouting for water that would never be enough. Flames were already climbing the wooden shelf beside the oven, reaching toward sacks of flour that would turn the fire into something far worse if they caught. I did not think about instinct. I did not think about proving anything to Threx or anyone else. I only thought about Mara, about the kitchen that raised me, about every warm loaf that had ever come out of that oven and into the hands of someone who needed it. Something inside my chest, something I had never felt before, pulled tight, and then released all at once. Fire came out of me for the first time in my life, not wild, not hungry, but controlled, shaped by every hour I had spent learning to measure heat instead of fear it. I aimed it carefully, starving the flames of air, the way Mara taught me to smother a stovetop fire, pushing the danger back instead of feeding it. Within minutes the fire was out, the flour sacks untouched, and I stood there shaking, smoke curling from my nostrils for the very first time. Mara wrapped her arms around my neck before I even understood what had happened. She was not looking at me like a dragon anymore. She never had. Threx arrived just after the smoke cleared, drawn by the noise. He looked at the scorched wall, then at me, and for a long moment he said nothing at all. When he finally spoke, his voice had lost its earlier certainty. He admitted that he had been wrong to measure me only against the dragons who came before me. He said my fire, when it finally came, was not weaker than theirs. It was simply built differently, shaped by care instead of instinct, and aimed with a kind of control many older dragons never bothered to learn. I did not know what to say to that, so I did what I always did. I offered him bread. This time he took it. I think about that night often, the fire that finally arrived, not from anger or hunger, but from love for a kitchen, a baker, and a colony that never once asked me to be anything other than what I already was. I am still learning what it means to be a dragon. I am still learning what it means to belong to two worlds at once. Scales on the outside, human patience woven through everything underneath. But I no longer wonder if I am a failure of my bloodline. Bread rises slowly. It needs no claws, no roar, no violence to become something worth sharing. It only needs warmth, patience, and someone willing to wait. Maybe that is the truest fire anyone ever taught me to carry.